great turning. I'm talking about what it is that we're going to do as a society that's going to prevent the worst effects of climate disruption. This paradigm shift, this altogether new way of seeing our place in the natural world, this global movement that will take us away from this delusional and dangerous idea that we're separate from the earth, that we can destroy our habitats without destroying ourselves. And the great turning towards a new sense of community and a new imagining of a commonwealth. A new reinvention of a culture of place and civic responsibility. I mean, honestly, you can hear the scorched brakes as this old way of thinking comes to a dead end. You can hear the tires squeal. You can hear the crunch of capitalism chewing on its own feet. Every cultural wrong turn creates the conditions for its own healing. It has begun. The great healing, the great turning has begun. And in a time of this emotional, economic, ecological despair is precisely the time for us to start over and reinvent ourselves. That is the task at hand. But, I mean, I don't want to get too carried away with the optimistic stuff. Sometimes people tell me that optimism these days is a sign of insanity, and that if you're not terrified, you're not paying attention. And it can't be denied that we live in a world of wounds. And let me just pick out one example from the Pacific Northwest. My colleagues at Oregon State are doing studies of trees, and the great trees, particularly the ancient trees in the old-growth forest, seem to be dying at twice the rate that they used to be. And it's found in all kinds of trees at every elevation, at different sizes, a doubling of tree mortality every 17 years. So what we're seeing is an increase in temperature across the American West that's having this widespread hydrological effect that is plain old killing these trees. And I have to say, that you go up in the forest and that's very evident that roots are burning all over the land. I was walking up in the B&B fire on Santiam Pass near Corvallis, where I live. And it's a very, very dangerous place to walk because that fire, that B&B fire, burnt the trees so hot that it burned all the way down into the roots. And when you walk across the land, you can fall in up to your hips in the places that the roots have been. And I was up in Alaska in the black spruce wildlands. And what I found there was that they have had such a drought that even the muskeg, the peat, the endless peat muskeg has dried up, and it caught fire. And they had miles and miles of burnt muskeg burning through the roots of these enormous expanses of forest. And then when the first wind came, the trees, without any roots at all, simply fell down. And I don't need to talk about the metaphorical roots that are going to be starting to burn and the climate refugees. What I just want to say is that the economic machine that has destabilized our climate raises the specter that we may make the planet uninhabitable for humans, and that we may take the plants and animals with us, many of them, when we go. David Orr says, this is a crime against the future. This is a crime that has as yet no name. There will be no judge, there will be no jury, just an awful silence. So I'd like to explain a little bit about how I feel personally in response to all this before I go into what makes me so optimistic and filled with hope. We have to go a little bit deeper before we can dig our way up. And so I'd like to read an essay from my book, The Pine Island Paradox. It's called The World Depends on This. And I should tell you that this essay was written in the spring of 2002. You remember the spring of 2002? Do you remember shock and awe? The world depends on this. The message machine was blinking when I got home from work. First, I want you to know that your daughter is going to be fine. I braced myself for what would come next. She was arrested during the anti-war demonstrations. They're holding her in the San Francisco County Jail. Frank and I have been watching world news all day. Now, suddenly, it wasn't about world news. It was about our daughter and a parent's fears. her wrists. The night before, I had dreamed about Erin. She was one of the young people in an outdoor clothing catalog, striding out in autumn colors, her hair as bright as apricots. But she wasn't in some dreamy, sun-saturated place now. She was sitting in a small cube of light in a darkened jail. I tried to picture a jail at night. Do the other inmates sleep splay-legged and heavy on their backs? Do they curl up as if they were babies? And our daughter, surely she's sitting awake on a bench with her knees to her chest and her arms wrapped around them. She'd be cold in that dark place. Babies startle if they're not wrapped tightly. We learned this in a child care class before she was born. Their bodies twitch and their arms flail if they sleep, and as nothing's holding them, they're afraid. So you have to wrap a newborn baby. We held our daughter close and wrapped her in blankets tight as corn in the husk. We loved her so much and raised her so carefully, and isn't this what all parents do if they can? Piano lessons, art lessons, lullabies, $100 safety seat for the car. When she learned to drive, we tried to keep track of where she went and when she would be home. It never occurred to us that she would go to jail. So, here's the first thing she said when she called collect from the holding cell. What can I say to keep you from worrying? To keep a parent from worrying, tell us you're home in bed, I said. But Frank took the phone from my hand. She told him she was in a holding cell with dozens of other women. They're strong, amazing women, many of them mothers and grandmothers, many elegantly dressed in black, she said. And Frank thought that Erin's own voice was strong and amazing, more certain than he'd ever heard it. To pass the time, the women are teaching each other to dance, she said. They're placing calls to news agencies, but they can't get through. Bombs are falling, newspapers aren't answering their phones. Injustice and environmental destruction tangle in nets of violence and profit around the world, and all these beautiful women are dancing in jail. The police released Erin at 2:30 in the morning. A friend came into the city to drive her home. Don't all parents want the world for their children? Fellow parents, tell me, wouldn't we do anything for them? To give them big houses, we'll cut ancient forests. To give them perfect fruit, we'll poison their food with pesticides. To give them the latest technologies, we'll reduce entire valleys to toxic dumps. To give them the best education, we'll invest in companies that profit from death. To keep them safe, we'll deny them the right to peacefully assemble. And to give them peace. To give them peace, we will kill other people's children or send them to be killed, and amass enough weapons to kill the children again, kill them 20 times if necessary. We would do anything for our children, but the one big thing. Stop and ask ourselves, what are we doing and allowing to be done? How ordinary and everyday are our disastrous decisions. Frank and I go busily about buying this or that, voting or not, burning up gasoline or jet fuel or split pine on a small scale in the short term, making things work for our children, forgetting that whatever is left of the world is a place where they will have to live. What will our grandchildren say? I think I can guess. How could you not have known? What more evidence did you need that your lives, your comfortable lives, would do so much damage to ours? Did you think you could wage war against nations without waging war against the earth? Didn't you wonder what we would drink once you had poisoned the aquifers? Didn't you wonder what we would breathe once you poisoned the air? Did you stop to ask where we would find solace in a world without wild things? Did you think it all belonged to you, this beautiful earth? You, who loved your children, did you think we could live without clean air and healthy cities? You, who love the earth, did you think we could live without bird song and swaying trees? And if you knew, how could you not care? What could matter more to you than your children and their babies? How could a parent destroy what's life-giving and astonishing in her child's world? And if you knew, and if you cared, how could you not act? What excuses did you make? And now, what would you have us do?